On board the spaceship, an alarm goes off due to a fire breaking out. Two astronauts argue, and one of them abruptly grabs a pair of pliers. At that moment, the spacecraft emits a blinding bright light. Meanwhile, on another ship, Colonel Harold Richards wakes up at exactly 6 a.m. and begins his daily exercise routine. His companion, microbiologist Abe Anderson, decides to sleep a little longer and upon waking, drinks coffee mixed with alcohol. After his workout, Harold heads to the lab, logs data into the ship's journal, checks on the beehive, feeds the electric eel in the aquarium, and then gazes out of the porthole. However, all he sees is pitch darkness. Outside, there is a spaceship that looks exactly like the one from the beginning of the story. As Harold carries out his daily duties, his companion drinks alcohol, tries on sunglasses, and watches old TV shows. Harold believes they are close to their destination, but Abe skeptically claims that their ship is actually drifting farther away from it. The next morning, Harold resumes his daily routine. While his companion continues to sleep, Harold accidentally drops his pin into the aquarium and tries to retrieve it. In doing so, he inadvertently submerges his military dog tag in the water. The eel brushes against the tag, causing Harold to suffer a powerful electric shock, and the ship's power momentarily shuts down. Abe immediately wakes up and rushes to the lab, only to find his companion's lifeless body. Panicked, the biologist wraps the soldier's body in a bag, intending to dispose of it through the waste disposal airlock. But he hesitates and cannot bring himself to do it. Distressed, Abe goes to the command room and tries to ask the central computer how far they are from Earth, but the artificial intelligence is unable to calculate it. The biologist returns to the airlock and falls asleep for a short time. Upon waking, he accidentally activates the lever, sending his deceased companion's body into the vastness of space. Filled with sorrow, he watches from the side and then, completely lost, falls asleep on the floor. Meanwhile, the ship enters the center of some kind of anomaly, and Abe awakens to bright flashes of light. To his astonishment, he sees a massive eye resembling that of an electric ray outside the ship. This sight causes the man to drink again. Slightly sobered up, the biologist reviews a video recording made on the ship years earlier. In the footage, Abe tells his superiors on Earth that the experiment with honeybees had failed since all the insects had died. Harold mentions that their pinball machine has broken down. Abe adds that they will approach their target when they no longer see any stars, after which the video ends. Depressed and disheartened, the biologist contemplates ending his life, mentally saying goodbye to his wife. But at that moment, the ship begins to shake violently. Seeing a bright light outside, the man puts on dark glasses and approaches the porthole. 13 years earlier, at a conference, Dr. Withersford told the audience about the upcoming space expedition, in which biologist Abe Anderson would play a crucial role. Some considered the mission too risky, but the professor insisted that it was vital for humanity. Following her, Colonel Harold Richards took the stage, as he was to command the spaceship during this journey. While the astronauts underwent various tests, the professor explained her theory of the multiverse, which, in her opinion, was far more complex than anyone had imagined. What lay beyond its boundaries was unimaginable. Abe was so shocked by the professor's conclusions that he unexpectedly fainted right in the hall. The story moves forward several years when Harold and Abe, inspired by the importance of their mission, enthusiastically carried out their daily duties. One day, while the biologist was studying the bees, he noticed that Harold was manually feeding the electric eel with sardines. Abe explained to the colonel that the eel should only be fed automatically, but Harold continued to feed the pet manually, despite the mortal risk. In the evening, Abe sketched something in his notebook, then gazed out of the porthole at a large cluster of stars. The next day, Abe threw all the sardines into the waste disposal airlock so that the colonel wouldn't risk his life anymore. The biologist went to the command room and was surprised to find Harold manually piloting the spaceship, even though the autopilot was perfectly capable of handling it. Harold just waved him off, but Abe insistently fiddled with the ship's control panel, for which he received a punch in the face from the soldier. Abe merely smirked and walked away, while Harold seriously pondered the futility of his duties here. The following day, Harold lashed out at his companion again for having thrown all the sardines into space. Abe smiled once more, so Harold grabbed a photo of Abe's wife and tore it in two. Staring at the ruined picture, the biologist heard strange sounds coming from another part of the ship. Abe went to investigate and, to his surprise, found a group of people who greeted the two astronauts from the beginning of the story, who were also heading to the edge of the universe. All those present had a drink of alcohol, and Abe joined them, soon developing an unhealthy attachment to alcohol himself. In another flashback, Abe discovered that several bees in the hive had died for unknown reasons. The thoughtful biologist approached the porthole to admire the millions of stars surrounding the ship. The daily routine in space continued year after year. Abe lay down on the couch and fell asleep. Harold found out that the automatic eel feeder was broken. Looking out of the porthole, the colonel realized that there were still plenty of stars outside. Meanwhile, Abe, who woke up later in the evening, regretted that he hadn't accomplished anything useful that day. The next day, the biologist tried to repair the pinball machine but got the wires mixed up, permanently disabling the device due to a short circuit. Meanwhile, Harold opened a can of sardines to feed the eel. In the evening, Abe made necklaces and bracelets out of the now useless wires from the pinball machine. Afterward, he found a photo of his wife in the cabinet, the one he had been unable to locate. The story returns to the very beginning of their journey. The astronauts energetically start another day on the ship, with Abe enthusiastically tending to the beehive before gazing out of the porthole at the bright sun and looking at the picture of his wife with sadness. The biologist heads to the control room, where he informs his companion that tomorrow he will attempt to harvest the first batch of honey. Harold remarks that controlling the spaceship is quite simple, despite the large number of levers and buttons. However, something strange is happening with the ship. In the evening, Harold and Abe become engrossed in a game of pinball as the ship passes near a massive bright celestial body. Mysterious flashes near the spacecraft continue the next day. Abe finds Harold standing by the porthole, confessing that he misses his wife. He adds that he embarked on the mission to secure his family's future. Abe replies that he went to the edge of the universe for the sake of science, believing it could be the greatest discovery in human history. The next day, while the two were eating space honey, Abe pulled out a photograph of his wife and admitted that, in truth, he agreed to the mission after his wife left him out of boredom. The biologist constantly played pinball until one day the machine malfunctioned. At that very moment, an alarm sounded as the bees in the hive began to die for an unexplained reason. That night, Abe couldn't sleep, and when he turned over, two astronauts from the beginning of the film somehow appeared in the cabin. The next day, Harold was surprised to find dozens of drawings in Abe's notebook depicting his own lifeless body. Abe told him he would explain everything later. Harold, believing that the biologist wanted to kill him, attacked Abe with a pair of pliers. Abe explained that he somehow vaguely remembered Harold's death from an electric shock, just as he had sensed the impending death of the bees. Harold couldn't understand how this was possible. We then see several versions of the Colonel's death in different alternate universes. Abe also witnessed this and told Harold that the tragedy might never occur, but for some reason, he could remember it. At the same time, the two astronauts discussed the same thing. Abe showed Harold other drawings, including ones depicting bright flashes of light in total darkness. Harold refused to believe that an eel could kill him and confidently plunged his hand into the aquarium. Naturally, he received a powerful electric shock. Abe looked out of the porthole, but there was nothing but pitch-black darkness outside. The biologist unsuccessfully tried to untangle the wires and went to get the pliers, which were lodged in the chest of his deceased companion. Using the tool, he cut several wires and pulled the whole bundle toward himself. At that moment, the ship began shaking violently. The biologist ran to the porthole and saw the ship veering off course, crashing directly into the darkness as if it had hit a wall, which shattered into thousands of fragments, illuminating everything with a blinding light. Suddenly, Abe found himself at home. He rewound the TV, then turned it off, realizing he had seen it all before. The man rushed into the garden, where he joyfully reunited with his wife. Suddenly, the phone rang, and Dr. Withersford informed him that the position on the spaceship had already been filled. In a newspaper photo, Abe saw the two astronauts from the beginning of the film. The story shifts back to the spaceship, where a serious malfunction occurred. One of the astronauts cut the wrong wire, causing a powerful explosion that instantly destroyed the ship, plunging everything into darkness. That's where the story ends, leaving us to wonder whether it was all a figment of Abe's imagination, or if he had indeed discovered the true multiverse. How did you like the movie Beyond the Edge? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.